In the gospel today, we get to hear a story about the naming of Simon by Jesus. Peter is the name he is given, Petros in Greek, meaning stone, rock. And it is upon this rock, Jesus says, that I will build my church. I love Simon Peter, our beautiful fellow flawed follower of Christ. However, I think we know his story. I think we know his name. Today, I want to lift up to you the names and stories of some people who might not be as familiar to us. We claim the scriptures are the word of God, inspired, spirit-breathed. However, they were also written in their contexts by people, and so there are voices, names, and stories that are missing. Whose stories, whose voices are missing is such an important question to ask, even today. One group that is often missing in the scriptures are women. The scriptures were written, transmitted, and interpreted largely in a patriarchal culture. So often women are missing, and even when they are not missing, we are often not as familiar with their stories. We don't always know their names. But just because we do not see them or hear them does not mean that God does not speak to them, that the Spirit does not move powerfully in their lives. And so I want to spend some time in our first reading today from the beginning of the book of Exodus, a book that is one of the most important books in the entire Bible, telling of God's deliverance, God's liberation of the Hebrews out of their bondage in Egypt. A story so compelling that its theme echoes and repeats throughout the rest of the scriptures, inspiring personal and collective narratives of liberation for countless people and movements throughout history. Long before the parting of the Red Sea, long before the plagues, long before "let my people go," there were 5 courageous, resourceful, faithful women. And let us spend some time with them today. The story begins. There was a king, a new king that arose in Egypt who did not know Joseph. Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers. Joseph the dreamer. Joseph who saved the people in the time of famine. The king did not know this Joseph. Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, says Pharaoh. And so he oppressed them with forced labor. Like so many other rulers and leaders throughout the ages, right up until today, he responds out of fear of losing power. And so Pharaoh sets up the whole system, makes up the rules and laws so that their whole society would keep them down, so that the power would remain completely his. However, even under pressure, under oppression, the people survived, thrived, multiplied. And as their numbers grew, so did Pharaoh's fears, to the point where the story says the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and became more and more ruthless with them. It makes sense. The oppressors are always afraid of the oppressed, in case they might need to face some sort of justice, some sort of response for their mistreatment. And so they so often double down on the systems of oppression. I wonder if that is where some of the resistance has come from, the resistance to Black, Indigenous, and other voices who have called for changes to the parts of our society that have and continue to oppress them. However, the ruthlessness of the Egyptians did not accomplish what it set out to do. And so, in a continued escalation of violence, Pharaoh calls for the death of all the male children of the Israelites. He calls for genocide. And here is where we meet our first two women, Shiphrah and Puah. Shiphrah and Puah were midwives, and Pharaoh ordered them to kill every male baby they delivered. However, Shiphrah and Puah, they resisted. They defied Pharaoh because the story says they feared God, a different kind of fear than Pharaoh's fear of losing power. One fear led to death and the other to life. They broke the law by letting those boys live. They were putting themselves in danger. And when they were called before Pharaoh to give an account of why there were all these baby Hebrew boys running around, they said that it was because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. That's pretty funny. It must have taken guts to say that to Pharaoh's face, but they did it. They resisted with their non-compliance and their subversive, courageous humor. Unfortunately, this was only a temporary delay, for Pharaoh would not be stopped. And so it says he put the killing of the children into the hands of his own people, and the innocent were slaughtered. Echoing the slaughter of the innocent by King Herod in the time of Jesus, echoing throughout the ages. For it is the innocent who pay the price for the fear of the powerful every day. And so we come to the name of our next woman, a Levite. And while we do not know her name from this story, we know that from elsewhere in the scriptures that her name is Jochebed. Jochebed, who gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And I imagine that what should have been a moment of great joy was overshadowed by terror and dread as the children of her people were murdered around her. However, in that dangerous environment, Jochebed did something incredible. She managed to hide her child, her newborn, for 3 months. 3 months. What a testament to her resourcefulness, her determination, and her love for her child. But when she could not hide him anymore, Jochebed had to make a terrible, desperate, dangerous decision. Like so many terrible, desperate, dangerous decisions still made by parents on the fragile hope of the survival of their children. Jochebed takes a basket, and it says she covers it with bitumen and pitch, and I imagine with her tears and prayers as well, and places it with her baby in the river. My heart breaks for poor Jochebed. The basket is found, however, by another woman, the daughter of Pharaoh. The daughter of Pharaoh is not named in the scriptures, just like her father. However, she has been given different names by the tradition. Sometimes she is called Thermuthis, or Bithia, or Asiya. But today I will call her by another of her names, Maris. Well, the daughter of Pharaoh, Maris, finds this baby in a basket. She was a member of the oppressors, the house of Pharaoh himself. And the story says she knew who this baby was. This must be one of the Hebrews' children, she says. However, rather than fear like her father, she is moved by compassion at the sight of this small, vulnerable life. And so she saves this child, takes him in, offers her protection, harboring one of the illegal children, a baby who wasn't supposed to be, who didn't belong, according to Pharaoh. She defied her own people, her own laws, her own father in favor of what was right. And at last, in comes our final woman, the daughter of Jochebed, the sister of this baby left floating in the river. It doesn't say her name in this story, but again, from the scriptures, we know this to be Miriam. It also doesn't say her age, but I imagine her just a young girl. And while her mother, Jochebed, leaves, she stays, waiting, watching over her little brother. And when she sees her chance, she rushes out, offering Pharaoh's daughter to find her a nurse for the child. And so she brings the child's own mother, her mother, who is able to be with and raise Moses, her son. How clever and courageous of this little girl. Shiphrah, Puah, Jochebed, Meres, and Miriam. Without the courage, humor, faith, compassion, and resistance of these women, the Exodus would not have been possible. Not only because of the survival of that child Moses, the liberator of the Hebrews, by the power of God, but also, I imagine, because of the effect of these women on his life. It says that Moses was with Jochebed until he grew up. And so I assume he grew up knowing his sister, Miriam. I also wonder if before coming to his adoptive mother, Meres, if he knew Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives who must have been important members in his wider community. And I like to imagine that he was formed by these women. I imagine that their faithful resistance to oppression, their courage and humor, their stories and character planted seeds in him that when grown prepared him to intervene in the beating of the Hebrew that led to his exile, that led him to say yes to God at the burning bush, that led him to stand up and resist the oppressive power of Pharaoh. And I wonder how much farther this influence goes. Like if a young girl named Mary, sharing the same name as Miriam, growing up in Judea, grew up learning the names and stories of these women. If it prepared her to say yes to God, to sing the Magnificat, a song of justice, of resistance to oppression, if it prepared her to become refugees in Egypt with her family. And I wonder if she told the names and stories of these women to her son, Jesus. These women are amazing. They were central elements to God's story of liberation, salvation, and deliverance. These women are some of the rocks upon which God has been building God's kingdom. I hope that we may be inspired by their stories and join with these women, our spiritual ancestors, our too often forgotten heroes of the faith, to resist evil, to fight oppression, to stand up in whatever way we can against injustice. God can use us in the story of liberation and salvation like God used them. I want you to know their names. I want you to remember their stories because there are so many people just like them whose names and stories are forgotten, who stood up, who were courageous and compassionate, subversive, who resisted, who were also part of God's plan of freedom. So for all those who are forgotten, let us remember these powerful women. Let us tell their stories through whom God acted mightily. Shiphrah, Puah, Jochebed, Meres, Miriam. Blessed are they. Thanks be to God.